Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight to have back with us today, and an honor, Dr. Herb London. He is the president of the London Center for Policy Research. He's the co-author of a book that is a must-read, the Encyclopedia of Militant Islam. And there's a picture of the book on the screen, and you may want to check that out at Barnes & Noble or at Amazon, the Encyclopedia of Militant Islam. And you know, Dr. London, what a joy to have you. I see you all over the place, and the fact that you'd give theDove a couple of sections this morning is a real honor. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Well, pleasure to be with you. Really a treat. Thank you.
Blessings on you. Well, listen, we're all kind of curious about the battle in Mosul. It was big news, and now it's not. What's your take on this, and why is it happening now?
Well, again, the reason for it, the timing for it isn't at all clear. But the one thing that I can tell you is, just for the sake of argument, suppose you were Eisenhower and you said to the Nazis in World War II, we're not going to attack Calais. That was just a ruse. Look, these are where our troops are going. We're going to Omaha Beach. We're taking X number of troops. We have X number of tanks and hardware that we're bringing along with us. And we're going to attack on this day. You can count on it. It's going to be June 6th. I mean, what are you saying to the enemy? This is precisely what we've done in Mosul. We've told them where the attack is coming from. We've told them who the forces are. We've told them when we are going to attack. I mean, again, one reason may be to reduce the collateral damage so that people leave in advance of this attack. But it seems to me very odd that this was an extraordinary opportunity for surprise, and we have given up that surprise.
Well, you know, Donald Trump brought this up. He said, hey, when's the last time you tell your enemy what you're going to do, and then all the people you want to get slip out of the region? Is that true?
Well, I think it is true. I think, you know, there's a lot that Donald doesn't understand about foreign policy, but on this matter, he certainly has it right.
So what's the significance of Mosul in that region?
Well, the significance of it, I think, can be overdone. It represents a defeat of the second largest city that's been taken by ISIS. That's number one. Number two, I think it has to be recognized that even if ISIS is defeated, it is metastasized. It is no longer only in Iraq and Syria. It is also in Libya and Afghanistan and throughout the region. So that even if ISIS is defeated there, it doesn't mean that the war with ISIS is over. In fact, the war takes on a somewhat different nature. The third thing that has to be understood is if ISIS is defeated completely, you still have militant Islam as an enemy. And so it will arrive in different forms, maybe not ISIS, but certainly in other forms as well. So the argument that we have to make is an argument against militant Islam, and that's a long war. That's not a war over several months or even a couple of years. It's a generational war.
About that. So how's it going from your perspective? What do you think's happening over there in Mosul? Because it's really not in the news a whole lot.
Well, it's not in the news a whole lot because the barbarians, the savages who represent ISIS, have killed a lot of people already in order to scare away the Peshmerga and the Iraqi forces. And there will be many casualties that occur for the reasons that I've cited. I mean, the city is completely booby-trapped, so there's no question there will be many casualties. My prayer is that there aren't casualties and that, of course, American troops are not put in harm's way. But I think that's unlikely.
Let's go over to Kurdistan. Why aren't we supporting Kurdistan more?
Well, again, the reason for that is very obvious. The reason is the Turkish government. We want to maintain ties to Turkey through NATO. And the Turks are very much opposed to having a major Kurdistan state on its border. They are friendly with the Kurdistan within Iraq, but the idea that there would be a larger Kurdistan that includes Syria and Iraqi territory and Turkish territory is the great fear. A very significant portion of Turkey is already Kurdish. 1 out of every 7 people in Turkey is a Kurd. And they are not so happy about having this large minority that's growing at a faster pace than native Turks.
There's a clash coming in Turkey, so can Kurdistan trust Turkey?
Well, probably not. I mean, if you think about the démarche between Erdogan and Putin, what did they discuss? They probably said, you know what, all right, we'll avert our gaze to the elimination of Assad. We won't worry about that. That's what the Turks are saying, even though they have vowed to remove Assad. And in return, the Russians have said, go ahead and kill the Kurds. We're not going to worry about that. So even though these two nations hate one another, and the Turks already shot a Russian plane out of the skies, there is no doubt that this rapprochement is based on that kind of...
Okay, so I guess it's a wait and see, but I know that Iran's got their eye on Turkey. I mean, in the long run, that's got to scare the Kurds.
Well, look, Iran and the Russians have put themselves in the position of being the strong horses in the Middle East. It is interesting that when Erdogan gave his speech about dealing with the Russians, he spoke for 45 minutes publicly. And during the course of that speech, he talked about the role of the Iranians, the role of the Russians, the role of the Turks, the role of the Kurds, and interestingly, one variable in the equation was not mentioned in the 45-minute speech, and that's the role of the United States. We are irrelevant. We are irrelevant in Syria. We may talk about safe zones. We can't provide those safe zones. We don't even know if the Raptor, which is the F-22, can penetrate the SA-300 radars and anti-missile system that the Russians have put in place. And so what we're talking about here is the United States that can only say, all right, we'll stop negotiating, as if anyone cares. So we are in a completely irrelevant position in Syria, notwithstanding all of the comments that have been made by Ms. Hillary and by Donald Trump during the course of this campaign.
All right. Well, I wanted to kind of go there a little bit because Trump says, well, as long as the Russians are going after ISIS in Syria, leave them alone. But what's the real motive?
Well, the Russians are not really going after ISIS in Syria. They're in Syria for one purpose only, to protect Assad and protect their own interests. They are building several nuclear plants in Syria. They've created a major naval base in Tartus. They've created a new air base in Mimian. They have created another base in Latakia. There is no question. They have become the major power in the Eastern Mediterranean. And they're saying to the Sixth Fleet, you know what? We are the strong horse here, not the Sixth Fleet of the American Navy.
Am I hearing you say that Trump and Hillary both have a flawed policy when it comes to Syria?
I don't think they understand the situation in Syria and the extent to which we have done nothing to protect American interests in the area. When the Civil War broke out in 2011, there was a great opportunity for the United States to provide support for the Free Syrian Army. There isn't a Free Syrian Army any longer. So now the United States really has no role to play. And the Russians have gone into this vacuum created by the appeasement policies of Obama and said, you know what, we'll join an alliance with the Iranians. And curiously, if you look at the southern flank going into Syria, it's American forces fighting with Russians and fighting with Iranians against the rebels. It's bizarre.
Wow. Has the relationship between the United States and Russia gotten a little cold lately with all the rhetoric?
I think it has gotten cold. The rhetoric is less important than what happens on the ground. The United States, it seems to me, had a significant presence in the Middle East. In 1975, Sadat and the Americans forced the Russians out of the Middle East. Now we have invited them back into the Middle East to supposedly deal with the poison gas question that Obama refused to deal with several years ago after the red line was drawn in the sand. Of course, the red line was written in invisible ink. And so the Russians have the responsibility of dealing with this question, which means, in effect, the Russians are there for one purpose and one purpose only: protect Assad. We have said our policy from 2011 on is to see Assad go. In the recent discussions in Lausanne, Secretary Kerry says, well, I guess we'll keep Assad for the foreseeable future. What does that mean? It means that the United States has pretty much given up on its policy position.
Putin has been quoted to say that the reason that he's being demonized during this presidential election by perhaps maybe Hillary more than anything else is nothing more than a distraction when he would like to have a workable relationship with the United States. Do you believe that?
No, I do not. I mean, look, Putin has his own interests. Nations do. If you've read Lord Palmerston, you know it's only interests that count. And the Russian interests are very obvious. They cannot, they're a dying nation. They have a life expectancy that is decreasing. They are suffering from an epidemic of alcoholism. They produce nothing at all that the world wants except for natural gas and extraction of minerals. There is nothing in Russia. And so what you have is a Russia that has become an external force. What they cannot do internally, they attempt to do externally by reliving the glories of the past. What Putin's strategy is to make Russia into a world power by expanding the Russian empire, by creating the old near abroad, by putting pressure on the Baltic states and the Ukraine, by moving into Crimea. I mean, keep in mind, the Russians signed an agreement with the Ukraine, and the United States was a signatory saying that we would not go into Crimea if the Ukrainians gave up their nuclear weapons. This was the Budapest Accord. The Russians have violated it. Have you heard a word from this administration about the violation of the Budapest Accord? I haven't.
Let me take a quick break. What an honor to have with us today Dr. Herbert London. He's the president of the London Center for Policy Research. By the way, his website is londoncenter.org. And also check out the book that he's co-authored entitled The Encyclopedia of Militant Islam. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back with Dr. London.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back to Focus Today, and an honor to have back with us today Dr. Herb London. He is the president of the London Center for Policy Research. His website is a must-go because there's so much good information there, londoncenter.org, londoncenter.org. We're talking about a variety of things, and in particular what's happening in Mosul, because it's kind of fallen off the front page, but it's still going on. Dr. London, do you think that no matter who gets elected, that the Cold War is back on with Russia, or do you think that if Hillary gets elected, that the uranium deal with Ukraine keeps it warm?
Well, I mean, the uranium deal is kind of interesting because here you have one of the most corrupt individuals on earth named Frank Justra, who ends up with 20% of the uranium production in the United States, which is sold to the Russians. This is a little bit like Lenin saying, you know what, we'll sell you the rope that we'll use to hang you. I mean, this is bizarre, absolutely bizarre. One of the things that has to happen, whoever is elected president of the United States, is to restore, one, the strength of the United States, the assertiveness of the United States in order to maintain global equilibrium. And the third thing is to restore the alliances that we once had with allies who make a difference. I mean, the Sunni nations are looking for guidance. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the Gulf states, Bahrain, all saying, look, we need a defense condominium to serve as a counterweight to the ambitions of the Iranians. But we need the United States to provide that kind of guidance. We're not doing it. So restoring that kind of confidence, which has been lost during the Obama years, is the first task of the new president. And it's a formidable task. And then the second thing is we've got to build our military. Trump is absolutely right about that. If we cannot send an aircraft carrier force into the South China Sea, because the Chinese, after creating unilaterally an air perimeter that they will defend, and now they have missiles that could take out our aircraft carrier, we've got to do something about the defense innovations that we have allowed to lag so far behind that we can no longer compete with the Chinese or the Russians on several fronts. It's astounding.
A Clinton administration, 4 more years of appeasement?
4 more years of appeasement and the world will be in complete disarray. The Chinese will be on the ascendancy, the Russians will be on the ascendancy, and the United States will be irrelevant. It will change the character of the globe. We will be in a very different place. I never thought that this democratic republic would be so imperiled as it would be if we found ourselves in that position.
Help us. Let me ask you this, Dr. London. Is there any indication from what you see from your position and intelligence that Donald Trump has a better handle on foreign policy than he's letting us to believe?
I think that he has people around him who understand foreign policy. Mr. Trump, with all due respect, is a maladroit politician. He has stepped on every verbal landmine, every trap that has been set by the Democrats. He's allowed this race to go from a referendum on key issues like national security to a referendum on the Donald Trump personality. It seems to me that what Trump has to do is stay on script, speak to those issues of national security. After all, I don't usually quote Trotsky, but Trotsky was right when he said, "You may not want war, but war wants you." The war is here. The war is on our shores. The war is in San Bernardino. The war is in Orlando. The war is on 23rd Street in New York. The war is in Chattanooga. It's in the Boston area. The war has come to America. He has got to make it clear that we have a national security strategy to deal with the war at home and the war abroad. If he does that, he wins the race.
This sounds like a sexist question, and it's not. I just want to look at it culturally. Will the Middle East accept a woman president?
Look, it's very hard to say. Attitudes are changing in the Middle East. Even Saudi Arabia is going through some modification in its views. It will be difficult, unquestionably, but the most difficult thing is to restore confidence in the leaders in the Middle East, whether you're a woman or a man, because there is so much cynicism. When I had the opportunity to speak to Sisi, the president of Egypt, he said the following: "I love America, but America doesn't love me." What he was getting at is that all of the promises that have been made by Obama to Egypt in the way of providing parts for the Apaches and sending in tanks to fight the war in the Sinai, he hasn't lived up to that. So restoring that kind of confidence is a major problem, whatever your gender.
What do you think the real motive is behind Obama/Clinton appeasement in the Middle East? Do they really think we can have a kumbaya moment and everybody gets along? Or is there philosophically a leaning towards their ideology in the Middle East?
Well, I think there is an ideological question, and it's very much related to the belief that the arc of history is moving in our direction, and that what we need is a kind of balance of power. The tilt to Iran is predicated on the idea that a strong Iran will be a stabilizing influence because the Shia will be able to balance its interests against the Sunni forces. And so the American tilt to Iran and the belief that the United States can withdraw is based on the silly supposition that the Iranians will be the stabilizing influence in that part of the world. This comes out of a paper that was written in 1980 by Gates and Brzezinski, who actually believed that this would happen. Now, again, I think it's misguided. I think in some respects it's even silly. But this is a presumption within the Obama administration about the future of the Middle East.
So, Dr. London, where do you think we are with the election? I mean, there's polls all over the place, but at the end of the day, if you average them all out, it looks like we're in a statistical tie. What's your thoughts?
Well, as far as the election is concerned, I'd say the following. If Trump talks about Obamacare, and talks about the 25% increases that occurred across the board based on government statistics. And he says, you know, Obamacare was originally introduced to lower premiums and to increase comprehensive care, and yet neither of those claims is true. He gets a lot of votes. Keep in mind that the Republicans won on that one issue in 2012, 2014, and it could lead to a victory in 2016, but he must stay on script. The second thing is, if Trump can win, he will win because he is not involved in distractions. When people say to him, well, you were for the war in Iraq before you were against it. And then he goes on to go a long diatribe about why that's not true. That's silly. Then you're going to have the stories that will come out of the woodwork about all of the women that Trump has groped and has kissed, given unwanted kisses to. Avoid that. Stay on the issues. National security, Obamacare, military strength. You deal with those three issues, and Trump is the next president of the United States.
WikiLeaks dumped number 20 this morning, about an hour and a half ago, and there's seemingly some pretty hot potatoes in there. Is that still a good way for him to go after it, or just let the news or Fox News cover it, because the other alphabet network probably won't?
I would let the news people take that story. Don't run with the story. How much confidence can you put in WikiLeaks? And again, keep in mind that Assange doesn't represent the best interests of this country. And he works for Putin. He doesn't work for America. And he may not like Hillary Clinton, but I don't have that much confidence in making him into a national hero. I'm very critical of people on Fox who have taken this guy and made him into a major figure in the campaign. I would not do that. If I were Trump, I would stick to the 3 issues that I mentioned. I would make my argument. I would say, look, this is a critical moment for the United States, and we have specific policies to deal with these issues that America must address.
Wow. Well, we got 12 days to go. We'll see what happens. He did spend most of his day yesterday going after the black vote, and I thought he made a fairly compelling argument. But I don't know if those percentages are the deal breaker for him right now. Do you?
Well, keep in mind that as far as the African-American vote is concerned, if he gets 12% of the African-American vote in places like Philadelphia, which I think is unlikely, but if he did, that would be a game changer. If he got 12% of the vote in Chicago, that would be a game changer. If he gets 12% of the black vote in places like Wisconsin and Michigan, game changer. So that is very, very important in this election, because those inner city votes very often served as a counterweight to what happens in the rest of the state. If you look at Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is really a Republican state, except for Philadelphia.
Trump, win or lose, is the Republican Party done?
I think the Republican Party is done. I think what you're going to see is a fractured Republican Party. It probably means that if Trump does not win, you will see a party that is split in half, the never-Trumpers starting their own third party, the Trump people being very angry at the never-Trumpers who they claim were responsible for the loss of Donald Trump in this presidential race. So you'll see a fractured Republican Party, which probably means that for the foreseeable future, the Democrats will be in charge and America will look more like a European country or maybe a Latin American country. So I'm not so happy about that prospect, but I think that this is a fairly logical way of looking at it.
No, it keeps us in a reality check. Thank you, Dr. Linden. God bless you, my friend, for your work. And let me say to our viewers and listeners, go to londoncenter.org. That's his website. Check out his book. He's co-author of a book called The Encyclopedia of Militant Islam. Let's stay in touch before and after, because it's going to be interesting.
It certainly is. Thank you very much for your good work.
Thank you, sir. All right, we'll be right back.